Forgotten Kings and Bloody Truths, unearthing the real Beowulf. Beowulf the Sunday, welcome back. Now, every legend has a secret and Beowulf is no exception. For centuries we've been spun a yarn about myth and monsters, but the real story, the one etched in blood and dust, is about to be unearthed. From this book. Actually, back into this book, chapter 2. Prepare to see the Anglo-Saxon world like never before. You think you know Beowulf, eh? Big, hairy-assed hero, kicking ass, taking names. Bit of old Viking fantasy. Nah, mate. That's just on the surface. And we talked about going beneath the surface last week. We talked about the manuscript. Beneath the monsters, the mead halls, and the gift-giving, there's a whole lot of history. Real kings and real battles. Okay, let's cut through the academic fog that often hangs heavy around Beowulf. For 2 centuries, first translation being 1815 by Grimmer Johansen Thorkelen, scholars have been wrestling with this epic, trying to figure out if it's a made-up fantasy or if there's solid history woven into the lines. Turns out, there's a lot more truth than you thought, especially when you start shining a light on the Geats and their kings. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. First, these Geats aren't some imaginary tribe cooked up for a dusty elegiac poem. Forget your D&D manuals, your fantasy epics. We're talking about the Gutas from what's now Sweden. This ain't some clever academic guess. The old tongues, Old English, Old Norse, they line up perfectly. We're talking about established linguistic rules, sound changes worked out centuries ago. The names, the sounds, it all clicks into place like a well-oiled lock. Bless you. These aren't just academic musings, these are proper linguistic facts. There's an uncanny and undeniable correspondence. The script says sip again, so I'm going to sip. Oh, baby. There's a solid bit of evidence that these Geats got violently stuck in outside of Scandinavia. We're talking about the raid on Frisia. That's the northern Netherlands, a place called Frisia. Sometime around 516, I think, is the consensus when it comes to the date. And who's leading the charge? None other than Hygelac, Beowulf's very own uncle king in the poem. You've got Gregory of Tours, a bloke born a couple decades after the fact, written about this raid, and then completely disconnected, we've got Beowulf poet, centuries later, chiming in with the exact same story. That's not a coincidence, mate. That's an historical echo. Hygelac, overwhelmed on the beach, trying to get his booty of treasure onto his ships, surrounded by Frankish kings. His great bones, folklore says, are supposedly found and buried on the island near the mouth of the Rhine. This isn't just some academic theory, this is verifiable historical identification. Hygelac in Beowulf is this person in Gregory of Tours, and hey, smarter men than you and I come up with this, so relax. And it doesn't stop with Hygelac. While his father, the old king Hrethel, and his brothers Hilbold and Halfsin, I butchered their names, but we'll just get on with it, are a bit thin on the ground historically, the identification of Hygelac as that is just the start. It's like finding a Rosetta Stone of early medieval European history, unlocking a whole series of verifiable links. Take Ongentheow, for instance. He's in Widsith, another ancient poem alongside a bunch of other historical figures who are demonstrably real. Pretty safe bet that this Ongentheow and Beowulf is the real deal. And his sons, Onela and Othere, they're popping up in the Younglinga Saga, which are Scandinavian sources. And the dates align too, early 6th century. This isn't just some dusty academic argument from a university lecture hall. This is putting Beowulf right smack dab in the middle of verifiable historical period. There are some bollocks about Beowulf being about a Mercian king from the 9th century. Just forget that shit. You hear arguments that the poem was written much later, perhaps even influenced by English kings. But why? Why would scribes in East Anglia be writing epic poems about Mercian kings when they were constantly at each other's throats? It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't add up, does it? Oh wait, there's a Mercian king called Beowulf, 1823 to 1826, and a King Hygelac, 1827 to 1829. But they always seem to forget poor little Ludeka, who ruled in 1826 to 1827. Sure, it was less than a year, but he ruled between Beowulf and Hygelac. If these names couldn't possibly have been influenced by the poem that at the time had been around for centuries, if that's all you've got, then try again. The idea that it was composed during the time of King Canute, around 1016. Sorry, Kevin. Also ignores decades of linguistic and historical evidence pointing to a far earlier composition. Most scholars, the ones with their heads screwed on anyway, reckon Beowulf was probably developed in the early 6th century. And when you look at the evidence, bloody hell, it's hard to argue otherwise. But people always do. The names, the places, the events, they all point to that turbulent, brutal period right at the beginning of the Dark Ages. Kinda. This wasn't some isolated, purely fictional yarn. It was a story rooted in the contemporary world of its audience. Now, what about our titular hero, Beowulf himself? The poem tells us he helps Eglur's avenge himself against Ongentheow, aiding him with weapons and warriors over a wide sea. And guess what? Scandinavian sources back this up. The battle between Eglur's and Ongentheow, again butchering names. This happened on the ice lake of Wenner. Real battles, real frozen lake, real cold-blooded history. No pun intended. So Beowulf is operating in a real, very violent historical landscape, but here's the kicker. There's no mention of Beowulf as a Geatish king anywhere. None. Nothing. He supposedly reigned for 50 years, was the last great king of the Geats, and yet his name is lost in every record, every saga, every chronicle we have. There's nothing. And get this, his name doesn't even fit alliterative naming conventions of the royal houses he's supposedly a part of. Seriously, I mean, look at this. Hrethel, Herbold, Herthsin, Hygelac, Hild, all start with a H. That's the alliterative scheme of the royal line. It's designed so father and son and kinsman can be named alongside each other in songs and verse. It's easy for memorization and powerful poetry. Weirmund, Wearstan, Weirlaf, W's. Another clear alliterative line. Now Beowulf is put down as a son of Edgetheow, linked to Weirmund. That's W for Weirmund, E for Edgetheow, B for Beowulf. It's a dog's dinner of a family tree, linguistically speaking anyway. It doesn't scan, it doesn't fit. Without some incredibly imaginative or convoluted kennings, their names won't fit into an alliterative verse of poems and songs. This alone should tell you something. If Beowulf was such a legend, this great hero reigning for 50 years, the last great king of the Geats, and let's not forget, according to the poem, he had no heirs to ensure the continuation of his line, why is his name completely missing from every single record? The brutal truth, my friends, is that this bloke's probably just poetic construct. A glorious, legendary hero, yes, but a historical king? No. His feats, ripping off Grendel's arm, battling Grendel's mum, facing down the dragon, they're not provable historical events, obviously. Hygelac's is. We know this. In fact, many of the monster slaying deeds find parallels in older folklore like the bear son motif and even the saga of Goethe. Probably pronounced that name wrong. There's a lot of pronunciation mistakes. I really should get on top of pronunciation. The bear son motifs and the saga of Goethe, we'll dig into those comparisons in a later video, so stay tuned for that, because this book goes through all of that stuff. But, and this is a crucial but, while Beowulf himself might be fictional, the literary device, the setting, the background of this story is undeniably steeped in actual historical events. These aren't just some pretty words. This is a gritty lens into the late 5th century and early 6th centuries, a time of warring tribes, brutal kings, and bloody, hard-won battles. If the titular character isn't exactly on par with figures like, say, William the Conqueror, what does that mean for Beowulf as a poem? Does it make it less important? Less significant? Bollocks. It makes it more fascinating. Well, does to me anyway. You see, this poem isn't just a fantasy. It's a window. It's a snapshot into a volatile period in European history, preserved through the eyes, or rather the words, of an unknown poet. It's a document that, despite its fantastical elements, speaks volumes about the historical realities of the early Middle Ages. It talks about kinship, loyalty, the fragility of life, the constant threat of war, the importance of treasure and its limitations. These are all reflections of an actual political and social landscape of the time. The Beowulf poet wasn't just spinning a yarn. He was using a familiar heroic archetype, the monster slayer, to frame a narrative that resonated with his audience's understanding of their own history, their ancestry, and their place in this dangerous world. They knew the stories of Hygelac, they knew the historical conflicts between the Geats and the Swedes, they would have understood that this poem, while grand and heroic, was set in a tapestry of real events and real people. Perhaps the fictional hero allowed the poet more freedom. Freedom to explore themes without being bound by strict historical accuracy for every single character. It allowed for the epic scale of the monsters without undermining the verifiable historical context of the world they inhabited. It's a blend that's incredibly sophisticated. It shows the Anglo-Saxons weren't just simple tribesmen, they were capable of incredible complex storytelling, weaving together myth and historical memory. The poem therefore serves as an invaluable, if sometimes oblique, historical source, much to the chagrin of Tolkien. It confirms external accounts, it fleshes out our understanding of our early Germanic culture, and it gives us a glimpse into the minds of people living 1500 years ago. Beowulf might be a fiction, but the world he walks through, the sweat, the blood, the Geats, that's as real as it gets. So where does that leave us? With a richer, more complex understanding of Beowulf, I'd imagine. It's not just a monster story, it's a historical document cloaked in epic verse. It's a reminder that sometimes the myths we tell ourselves are deeply rooted in the realities of our past, and that's what makes it so enduring. The blend of verifiable history, the compelling fiction, is what gives Beowulf its raw power. It speaks to us because it touches on universal human experience. Courage, loss, loyalty, the struggle against overwhelming odds, but it grounds them in a world that, for all its ancient strangeness, is as real and brutal as our own. Learning this, knowing this historical underpinning, transforms the poem from a piece of academic study into a roaring, breathing account of a bygone age. So, next time you hear someone dismiss Beowulf as mere fantasy, tell them the bloody truth. Tell them. Tell them about Hygelac and Gregory of Tours. Tell them about the Gothas and the raids on Frisia. Tell them about Ongentheow and his sons Onella and Othair and the youngling at Saga. And then maybe, just maybe, they'll start to see that this isn't just some dusty old poem. It's a window into the bloody brilliant and very real history of our ancestors. This journey into Beowulf's hidden history isn't just academic, it's a stark reminder that even our wildest tales, often anchored in the hard, unyielding bedrock of human experience. The monsters might be fiction, but the heart of the battle, the loyalty of the kingsmen, the fight for survival, that, my friends, was brutally and undeniably real. Don't forget to leave a comment if you have any questions. Anyway, YouTube algorithm thinks you'll like this video. Happy Fridays. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed, like the video if you like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.